I'll kick off then. Right. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining. Today, I'm here with Huw Davies. Huw is the CEO of Ozone API. Thank you very much for agreeing to come on here.
Hey, Paul, no, thank you for having me. Pleasure.
So, first of all, a question I intend to ask everybody that I speak to. When I was young, before I had to think about anything as serious as work, the thing I really wanted to do was to become an actor. Now, what was it that Hugh, when he was first young, wanted to do? What was your aspiration?
So, honestly, I never had a particular thing in mind. I loved sport. I loved football. I then loved skiing. I think I knew pretty early I wasn't good enough at either of those for it ever to be a job. But yeah, I never really thought about it. In fact, it was only when applying for my first sort of graduate job out of university, that I ever started thinking about it. And then, frankly, I had no idea either. So I didn't ever have a clear vision. I was just sort of drawn to people I liked being around.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much the view of everybody that I interview with, apart from one person who I've ever interviewed who has an exact plan of everywhere he wanted to go. Most people tend to be influenced by people they bump into more than anything else. So it's interesting
Yeah.
that you're the same in that regard. Okay. And so your early career and this was where we initially met because we both worked at Barclaycard at one point. You've obviously worked at the likes of Barclaycard. You did 2 years at Mastercard. You were then at HSBC. Now, I wouldn't be expecting you to be as indiscreet as to say anything bad about any of those companies, but I'm sure there must have been a reason why you suddenly left that world of working for huge multinationals to go into something that was a bit smaller. So perhaps you can tell us a bit more about why that was.
Yeah, sure. And it's kind of almost building on the previous point as well. So, I mean, I ended up joining the graduate program at Barclays. I didn't have any particular desire to get into financial services. I applied for a number of different graduate programs, but through the process, I just really liked all of the people and everything I saw through the Barclaycard graduate program. Ended up there for 17 years, and they were fantastic. It was similar. I tended to work with, I was attracted to the shiny things. So I always ended up doing jobs which were building something new. So one of my really early roles was building this e-commerce startup that Barclays was creating. I ended up building partnership businesses, running country businesses. I always liked doing the shiny, exciting, fast-moving stuff. Building new companies, building new strategies, building new products, managing country businesses. And that really flowed through my career. And often there were people I really enjoyed working with. They were doing the shiny, exciting stuff. I worked with them. I realized I enjoyed that. And actually I was quite good at the chaos of having a blank sheet of paper and working out how to build a business. And spent many, many years doing it in large corporates at Barclays, at Mastercard. My focus was on driving all of the new digital payment initiatives, wallets, Apple Pay, Transit, all of the new interesting stuff. And I was building the team to drive all of that. So most of my career in corporate, I was never actually doing the really big head office corporate roles. I was always sort of on the periphery, building something new, defining a strategy. And I just really enjoyed it. And having had the privilege of doing it in big companies where frankly, you've got a lot of funding, you've got safety net, all of those sorts of things. I got to a point where I just thought, I really enjoy this. I want to go and do it properly. And yeah, spent some time working with a founder to help him build his business. And then, yeah, since then, doing it myself. And I never looked back, but it's been great fun.
Okay, so tell me a bit more then about when you first made the switch and the differences you noticed and the things you found hard and the bits that perhaps you felt able to bring with you from having worked at the big corporate companies.
I'm not sure there was a really big, I guess, change in approach or change in culture or anything. I'm at Barclays. I remember at one point I was building out a completely new company and new business in Italy. It started with me and a blank sheet of paper. Now, in a startup environment, it's kind of similar. You're trying to work out, well, yeah, what's the end game? What's the go-to-market strategy to get there? What are the things that make us different that we need to really drive in the messaging? Who are the right people we need to be successful? All of those sorts of things. You're thinking through the same challenges, whether it's a new business for a really big corporate or a startup. I guess the thing that um, you don't have are as deeper pockets, but again, you just need to be smart about how you use resources, and usually it's about really smart people achieving an awful lot rather than throwing money at a problem. But I don't think I ever real felt a huge big shift in the ways of working. It was just yeah, just slightly different environment.
It's very interesting you should say that. From my position, a lot of companies that I speak to in the startup, scale up world, one of the common themes is that they're reluctant to take somebody from a big environment and bring them into a small environment for fear that the lack of resource, the lack of structure, the chaos will be too much. They're normally more interested in someone who's already left that world, done a couple of years, and then can come in. But there are, people like you who've made that journey successfully. So do you think that's potentially overplayed as a fear by employers, or do you think it's very dependent on the person you're speaking to?
So if you viewed it in a black and white sense, if someone's been in a big corporate, they're not going to succeed in a startup or a scale up. That would probably be a little bit too binary. Because it does come down to a number of different things. So, like I say, I mentioned, I in the large corporate environment, I always really enjoyed the fast-paced, new, innovative building stuff. I was never comfortable in a big headquarter role where things move slowly. I did that once, and great role on paper. I honestly, I struggled with it a little bit. It was just too slow moving. Um, But it also depends on, so whilst there are very, very different roles within a big corporate, you also have very different roles within a startup or a scale up, and businesses that can be at very different stages. So yeah, if you dropped someone from um, say for the sake of argument, a very well-defined product role in a large, very, very large corporate and drop them into a brand new startup with that's just trying to work out what it does, that's probably going to be too much of a challenge. You'd be focused on what are the processes and practices and all of those things that might not be there, as opposed to actually how do you design a great value proposition that's going to resonate in the market. Now, so I think there are scenarios where the gulf can be too big, but it doesn't mean someone coming from a large corporate can't succeed in a startup and vice versa. But I think it's about getting the right kind of role and the right phases. Again, if you're a CFO, you can be a CFO in a number of different types of company. You want a really disciplined accountant with a good strategic vision and all of those sorts of things. So I think it depends, and a huge part of it is culture. It's the person that you're bringing on. Do they seem like someone who's comfortable with the chaos that you can sometimes have in a startup and a scale up? And if you're bringing someone in to get you to the next stage, are they bringing the right experience of that sort of stage? So it's maybe beyond where you are today and where you want to be in 9, 12 months time. So I think it's very much it's a nuanced answer. It's not a yes or no, but people I think we've brought in many people who've been in large corporates and done an incredibly good job. And I've seen it go the other way as well because it's just too big a leap.
Okay, and so what advice would you give to somebody that's within a big company and is looking to move into a startup scale up for how they could um, position their experience in a way that would be attractive to someone like you?
Um, Well, first of all, I'd say spend some time getting out and talking to people because I mean, I work with a lot of other CEOs and founders and a lot of other companies.
Mm.
Not all startups and scale-ups look the same.
Yeah.
The challenges they face, where they need to sort of really try and over-index to get them to the next level. It looks different. The cultures look different. The size is different. The levels of maturity are different. So I think there's value in just going out, meeting people, talking to people, and understanding what's the right kind of startup. Because often it might not be um, three people and bootstrapped or pre-seed funding. It might be a scale up with a few hundred people that's the right next move. So I think there's a bit of understanding what's the right kind of environment that allows you to be successful and looking for those characteristics. But then it's, yeah, how do you tell your story? So in my case, my story was always about building new businesses. It was thinking through what is the overall strategy, what's the value proposition, what's the right go-to-market approach, all of those things that you need. So I was able to tell my story and sort of justify, I think I can play a role here and help you accelerate when I first made that move into a startup. So I think you need both of those. Really understand what you're getting into and what would be the right kind of environment, but also really think through how to tell your story in a way that will help that company kind of get to the next stage. Because that's what most startups and scale ups are looking at. How do I bring in the right people that will get me from where I am today to where I want to be in 12 months' time? If you're the person that can get them from where they want to be in 48 months' time, it's probably the wrong time for you to join. So getting that fit, I think, is really important.
Yeah, and fit is something you've mentioned already, and it is something that I certainly find is even more important within smaller organizations because you could have the perfect skill set from somebody, but if they're not going to fit in well with a team that's already close, and as I know that it is at your place, and they're not someone that you think I really want to be working with this person every day, that can make a big negative impact on the company, can't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you see this all throughout your career. A small number of really positive people can have a huge outweighted impact on the culture and the performance of organization. A small number of the wrong people
Mm.
can have a massively detrimental impact. So it is really important, I think, to get that right. And I mean, we at Ozone API, we spent a lot of time thinking about the culture and what's the kind of environment we're trying to create. And I mean, we're a business that broadly we started building in the times of COVID. So we've been remote first almost from the outset. We're a very global business. So our customer base is completely global. Our revenues are completely global. The team's completely global from we got folk in the Americas across to Australia. So we've had to be very thoughtful around what's the right culture. And basically we set out to say we want to have a kind of a small group of really smart experts, but we know nobody's going to succeed on their own. No one knows everything. So in this international kind of remote first, not always remote first, we've got some offices in different parts of the world. But how do you create an environment where people really work together well? It isn't about egos. It's not about one person who has all the answers. It's about creating that really vibrant team working. And yeah, if you bring in the wrong person, it can be hugely detrimental. So it's worth, we spend a lot of time during the recruitment process. There's obviously all of the technical skills you're looking for and the experience. We spend a lot of time on, is this person the sort of fit that's going to drive us forward? Culture is a huge part of it.
Yeah, I would agree. Certainly been my experience. So on your LinkedIn page, the opening comment you make about yourself is, I believe open banking, open finance, and open data will change the world. Tell me a bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big statement, but it's one myself and my fellow co-founders, Chris and Freddie, we passionately believe in. I mean, I've been in financial services for It's going to be 30 years this year, which is a little bit scary. I genuinely think this is the most exciting thing that's happened in my career so far in terms of the potential to genuinely transform an industry. So the internet allowed things to go from physical branch to online, but fundamentally banking's still the same. I think what we've got here is um, a infrastructural foundation that can solve huge challenges for the world. It can solve financial inclusion and access to credit, things that really help kind of drive society and accelerate economies. It is driving growth in economies through creation of new companies. It's allowing innovation in new ways. So customers being able to give consent for their life to securely be kind of integrated between the different services they use. Okay, at the moment, it's largely focused on banking, but the potential of this is huge. It is already tackling things like access to credit, which, yeah, is a huge catalyst for societal growth, and it is already impacting things like economic growth through, as I say, creation of companies, creation of jobs. The potential here is enormous. We've barely scratched the surface so far, but done globally, done to a really high standard, and done in a way that truly unlocks that potential of societal growth and economic growth, I think this is an enormous catalyst. But as I say, we're just at the early stages of this at the moment.
Yeah, it's an interesting timing as well for it, given that the political agenda has now moved very much against a global approach in some regards to be at the forefront of something that accentuates how much better things can be when there is a global approach. So I imagine that's sort of an interesting contradiction at the moment.
It, and you know what? It's really tough. So, I mean, we're a global business, and I mean, what we do effectively, we work with banks and financial institutions all around the world to help them deliver these open banking and open finance APIs. Now, the thing that's been driving this in a lot of markets has been um, governments and regulators recognizing this is a good thing for the economy and mandating it across the banks. What we're seeing at the moment with all of the geopolitical turmoil and um, I guess the protective me first approach to politics that we're seeing
Mm.
in a few markets, it's slowing some of that down. There's a lot of uncertainty in the US at the moment around what's going to happen with the regulation. It's actually not stopping the development of the market because this is happening. Banks are implementing, there's huge amounts of usage, but the political environment is having an impact. I remain pretty optimistic about this. So we're already seeing projects that are looking at showing how you can connect different national open finance ecosystems to solve even bigger problems. So areas like trade finance, if you can make it easier and more secure for participants in a trade flow to deal with each other, reduce the chance of risk, ease the movement of money and the movement of the trade flow, that's a massive economic stimulant. These things are still happening. There's work to pull together different countries to show how this can be done. So I do personally, I find it a little troubling, some of the political directions we're seeing at the moment. And it is having real impact on different businesses, but I see a lot of
It's
really
well,
exciting opportunity in front of us as well.
yeah, no, it makes sense. Okay. And so having been someone that's gone from a corporate environment to then actually grown your own business, what advice would you give to somebody that's fairly new to growing their own business?
Hmm. This is there's so many different things. I think for me a really important point is just balance. Don't assume the successes mean everything's going to be rosy, and don't assume the things that don't go well for you mean it's all going to be a disaster. Because in a startup, in a scale up, you inevitably have some bumps, some things go better and faster than you expect. Some things take longer than you expect. That doesn't mean you're a hero and it doesn't mean you're a failure. I think having a real clear view of what are we trying to achieve? What are the things that we need to get in place to get there? And what does small progress and momentum look like? Because if you spend the entire time focused on 18 months' time, you're going to fail. You need to have that North Star and a clear vision. You need to make sure you're doing the right things every day, every week, every month to be moving in the right direction. You can't control everything, um, but you can focus on the things that you can control and make sure you're driving constant momentum. I say things will go better than you expect. Some things will go worse than you expect. Don't over celebrate. Don't over commiserate. Keep a kind of level head and stay on course and keep moving. And yeah, you'll be moving in the right direction. So yeah, I think that's the main thing, but there are so many,
I'm
so many
sure.
learnings along the way.
No, I'm sure. Okay. And so, what mistakes would you say that you've made that have made you a better leader? It's as you say, there's plenty of positive things that you can that everybody can espouse, but it's quite interesting learning from the mistakes that people have made.
Yeah, and I mean, everyone, if they're honest, have probably been various facepalm moments through your career. I, one that really um, stuck in my mind, and it was when I was working for a guy you'll know very well when I was at Barclaycard, brilliant leader.
Yep.
And it was the first time I was given the opportunity to run an enterprise sales organization. So I was asked to come in and design how do we take this company from what it does today to be international across multiple markets, but with much, much larger customers. The strategy bit I felt very comfortable with, and kind of designing the proposition. But then I was given an enterprise sales organization to lead, and we were out trying to land the whales. And there were two things I think I really learned. One, the power of leading indicators. I spent so many executive committee meetings where it was, when's this enormous deal going to land? Like, oh, we're nearly there. We had a great meeting last week with their commercial director. It's all moving in the right direction. We're nearly there. Of course, it always took longer than expected.
Sure.
And I did a terrible job of describing the leading indicators, the proof points of momentum. And all the conversation was focused on was when's it going to sign? Now it did sign, like one of our mutual friends, it was a deal that allowed him to cap out on his bonus, and it was a transformational deal. Took a lot longer than everyone expected. And I spent months getting heat in the executive committee because I mismanaged the
Interesting.
communication. It was all about when's it going to sign. And what the two real learnings there. One, I didn't do a good enough job of articulating the proof points around momentum. It's not signed yet, but these things have all happened. And
Mm.
that means you have a better understanding of the process that gets you there. If
So
you're
not
if you're
necessarily,
tracking,
sorry to interrupt, but not necessarily overselling what was going to happen, but just not showing the progress that had been made in sufficient detail. Is that it?
yeah, yeah. And there's one, yeah, make sure you're monitoring. Are things actually moving? But
Mm.
also understanding what are the points in the process that mean I know I'm heading in the right direction.
Okay.
So back to that, you need a North Star, but you need to understand the key progress you need to make along the way. What does good look like between now and next week?
Mm.
Not have I signed it or not.
Yeah.
And I kind of learned the importance of really understanding the process and the milestones, but reporting on progress, not just focused on outcome. But the other thing with that, and you all know this from a sales environment, Paul, don't fall victim to happy ears. You get a lot of people who they're just so focused on hearing a bit of good news.
Mm.
Um, and then all of a sudden you think, oh, this deal's going to happen. They're not thinking through what are the key milestones? Are the right people involved? Do I understand what needs to happen between where I am today and something being signed and implemented? And kind of, if you're too focused on a little bit of good news you've heard and you're not thinking through all of those, guarantee the deals are always going to take longer and more won't get there than you expect. So
Yeah.
yeah, I learned a lot during that period.
Yeah, I think that ties in with one of the lessons I learned, which is that it's better to deliver bad news well than good news badly.
Exactly right. That's a great point. And I think you you learn that a few times over your career from some uncomfortable experiences, but it's a very valuable lesson.
Yeah, absolutely. And if something ends up coming in at 99% of what would have been an amazing number, then people will only concentrate on the 1% that you didn't deliver as well. So
That can happen. Yeah.
yeah, that can definitely happen. Okay, fine. So thank you for that. Um, a lot of people put a lot of store in management books that they've read that have been very inspirational to them. What about you?
Um, Honestly, I'm really ashamed to say that I'm not that bookish when it comes to learning, kind of sort of academic focus and career focus. I enjoy reading, love reading, but I've always enjoyed much more kind of learning through seeing and doing, getting involved. I learn best in a very practical way. So getting involved in things, but also observing people, looking at kind of who does certain things better than I do, and what can I pick up from them. From the, I guess it's slight fiction. One of an interesting book I've read a couple of times is Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. Um,
I've not read it. I've heard of it.
it's quite heavy going, to be honest, but it really pulls out the difference between how different mindsets approach things. So someone who is very, very regimented and focused, and someone who is much more kind of roll with it and see what happens, and they're journeying together, and yeah, they both find it really hard to understand where the other one's coming from. You see that day to day in business environments, in personal kind of friendship groups. But again, it's a really important thing, I think, to think through when you're trying to build an organization, create a structure. How do you actually get very different people to work really well together?
Yeah, I mean, like me, you would have done lots of different tests, particularly from a sales background and Myers-Briggs and different colors and all of this. And I can remember early in my career, and I worked at Coors, we had to do the one with the colors, and they went round and gave the various personality summaries of the different colors in the room. They said the greens are keeping very quiet because they're analyzing everything and they're enjoying taking in the data before making an opinion. The yellows are just enjoying being around other people because that's where they get their energy. Um, and then at the end, the Reds, which was me at the time, they said the Reds are sitting down, being very pleased with themselves because, as far as they've concerned, they've won and they've got the best colour, and everybody
Yeah.
else has lost, which is particularly irritating to the people in the yellows and the green group. And it was really eye-opening at the beginning of the career to realise that just because you see something as black and white, other people don't at all. And I imagine that's been
Yeah.
very interesting for you in building various teams over your career.
Yeah, that's right. And I think those things can be really powerful in terms of understanding. Um, but you can also make the wrong assumptions from them. Because again, people, depending on the situation, whether it's a calm situation, whether it's a stress situation,
Yes.
people change a lot as well. So yeah, it can be dangerous to over rely on color classifications and things like that. But I agree with you. I've always found it fascinating going through those sorts of experiences. And yeah, again, if you build in a diverse team and you've got all of these functions across sales, finance, all your product, your engineers and your product guys, you need to bring together so many different types of people. And it's how do you create an environment where everyone can thrive and be their best selves? I mean, that's the objective. It's a utopia. It's incredibly hard to achieve, but it's a really important objective.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're in a really good space with that ozone in view of a recent nomination that I saw.
Yeah, that was nice. So we won a Breakthrough Culture Award. It's it it's a great validation that we've brought a really good team together and everyone's in it heading in the same direction. So it's a sort of thing that it's not about an individual. It is about the company, but it's mostly about the people. I mean, we spend quite a lot of time thinking about what does ideal look like, and also how does that change as the company grows and evolves. Because what was the right answer 12 months ago isn't necessarily the right answer now, and it won't be in 12 months' time. So it's good to create quality time to think about what's the ideal culture? What are the things that we're trying to achieve? And most importantly, what are the things that we don't want to see? So that if we see the slightest hint of something that we don't think is healthy for the team and the company moving forward, we can point it out early with minor course corrections rather than any big disasters. But yeah, we were really pleased with that award. It was a great validation. We've got a fantastic team. And yeah, I think a lot of the people sort of love working together, and I think it's a reflection of that.
Yeah, I mean, not betraying any confidences, but I can definitely confirm that's true. And I think you've got a really good balance of just being the right side of the line between valuing the culture without making the culture become a bit of a cult. I've worked at places where, the name of the company becomes almost, well, it becomes an adjective where people use it all the time and say, oh, we can't do that. That's not very X, and say that they substitute the word of the company, and it becomes yeah, a bit too mystical. Whereas I think you're very, mindful of culture, very practical in terms of things you are or aren't prepared to compromise on for the best of reasons. And I think, that is shown through that recognition. So yeah, well done.
That's
Um,
kind of you say, so thank you.
no, no worries. So what do you wish you'd known before you'd founded a company? Is there something you think, oh, I wish someone had told me that? And again, I'm sure there's probably a few, but perhaps you could share a couple of thoughts on that.
So one thing I think I've come to realize, and I'm really, really pleased I've fallen on the right side of this, um, is that three founders can be an incredibly powerful combination. So I built Ozone API with Chris and Freddie, my fellow co-founders. It's worked really well because we all bring something completely different, but highly complementary.
Mhm.
And it's nice. There's kind of no ego. All of the difficult decisions we make together. Yet we all have our clear areas of accountability and responsibility. Um, but I think in a lot of parts of life, three is a powerful number. I mean, when you're communicating things, kind of landing messages in threes often works well.
Yeah.
Three is a really good number of people to make complicated decisions, particularly when they're all from different perspectives. I think sometimes you can have a single founder business where, unless they really bring in an inner circle, it can probably be quite a lonely experience. And who do you turn to? I've seen quite a few businesses with two founders where it's all golden until there's a bit of a difference of opinion, and then it can get difficult. Three has been a fantastic experience. I think we made better decisions together than we ever would have individually made on our own. And it's just created balance and support. So yeah, if I was to do it again, I'd always want to have two fellow founders alongside me so you can really kind of get that balance and bounce things around in the right way whilst you're going through all of the pains and the triumphs of that growth journey.
Interesting. Again, because I suppose traditionally, socially, three is always seen as an awkward number. If you have a group of friends, it can be quite tricky. But within the world of business, if you've got those complementary skill sets and you're all, not wanting to put a negative spin on it, but making up for your each other's shortcomings in areas, so filling all the skill gaps, that makes sense. That could be really helpful. Okay. Um, One question that I get I come across a lot through candidates that I deal with is the people that are wanting to make the move from, for example, SVP up to becoming a CRO. It's one of the kind of hard moves to make, and you've obviously, been around people that have made that change as well as having made it yourself. What advice would you give to someone that's wanting to break into that C level?
Yeah, I think this is another nuanced one, right? Because it doesn't look the same everywhere.
Mm,
So in a smaller organization, that C level, you're still going to be pretty hands-on.
mm.
Um, it looks different if you're in a several thousand person organization. So it really does depend on the nature of the organization. I think, and actually, this is a journey as we've gone through from kind of startup bootstrap, just a couple of us, to now a big team spread around the world. You continually kind of are making that change. So I need to focus on the next big things and gradually get out of some of the weeds that have been occupying most of my time. It's very similar, right? It's not a one day you're doing all of the work, the next you're sitting there lording it over people and leading. It needs to be a transition and a balance. So again, depending on the type of organization and where you are, that'll look a little bit different. But it's about sort of continuing to add value on based on your sort of practitioner's expertise, but also making sure you're then clearing the time to think through and focus on the big picture things. Um, so it's getting rid of the small noise to focus on more big stuff. It isn't I draw the line and no longer do anything below this. It, I'd say, I think over the past sort of 5 or 6 years, my role has changed massively every year. So since we did the investment round, there's an awful lot more of my time now that goes into preparing for managing the board, which drives a different thought process, a different set of activity. Now, to do that, I've had to let go of some other stuff, and we brought in the team so that there's a home for everything. But it wasn't all of a sudden the job was different. It was getting rid of 20% at that end to free up 20% at this end. And I personally, I think that's the way to approach it. It's organic rather than a completely drastic change in role. You need to clear some of the noise to focus on the next big topics.
And it sounds like from what you've
Do the
just
stuff you're really good at alongside it.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like from what you've just described then that some good advice for somebody wanting to make that move would be one, don't neglect the day job of what you're being paid to do in the effort to get to the job that's above it. But also the old adage of make your boss's life as easy as possible by taking away the kind of stuff that you've mentioned that you really couldn't afford to be doing if you were going to be concentrating on investor relations and pitch decks and all this funding distraction because it's very important, but funding work that you had to do. So if you're able to show that you can take that kind of stuff away from your boss while not letting your day job slide, then that would hold you in good stead as well.
Yeah, exactly. And it's always a question of prioritization. There's always noise. So if you can reduce the noise and do a few more big value adding things, you're already stepping into that space. And as you say, usually it's around, okay, what are the next level above me? What's some of the noise there that I can take away?
Mm,
Because there's always in any role, there's stuff you'd like to be spending a bit more time doing, and there's noise that's preventing you from doing that.
mm.
Everyone's got that. If you're able to spot actually the next level above me, this is the noise that I can help take away. You're moving into that space a little bit gradually. But yeah, when you make that move, if you go from I don't know, a head of sales to a chief commercial officer, equally, the point I'd make it isn't a drastic completely different role. You're in it because all of the stuff you've been doing. It's just get rid of more of the noise at the bottom to free up time to do the more important stuff at a that you've perhaps not been doing, which is about kind of the future strategy, direction, etc., etc.
Okay, it's great. Thank you. So I I know quite a lot of the answer to this, but I'm going to ask it anyway, but by virtue of having worked together. But when you're looking for senior sales leaders in your organization, what are the things that you value the highest?
So, and again, there's nuance on this, right? Because it depends very much on the organization, the
Mm,
product, the challenges, the market that you're going after. So
mm,
right now, I mean, Ozone API, we've built a complex technical product. We solve a hard problem for banks and financial institutions. So it means we are, and largely we get to market through strategic partnerships. So we're great at the technology. We can't be in front of every bank all around the world. So for us, it's about building kind of strategic partnerships that will allow us to distribute at a much greater scale than we could ever manage. So what wouldn't work in this particular role are people who are used to kind of high volume selling of something very kind of simple and well defined. This is strategic enterprise, and that requires people who are, I think, it's much more of a partnership process than a sales process. It's about how do you bring in the right people at the right time to move the opportunity forward. So it doesn't work to bring in someone who thinks they're the hero and they can do everything.
mm,
What we kind of look for are people who recognize they'll play a role of leading and driving a strategy to create relationships, but they'll only be successful by bringing in all of the right people at the right time and recognizing the power of the team. So it becomes very much we need people who strategic, good relationships, but fundamentally it's back to the culture. You want people who yeah, huge ego, it wouldn't work. This has to be someone who comes in and realizes they'll succeed by bringing in the experts at the right time. But still a fairly small organization, so people need to be sleeves rolled up and hands on. So again, like egos don't work. So yeah, but for a different kind of business at a different time, you might need different sort of people. But for us, very much, I want people who, yeah, they're team players, but have that sort of sophistication to deal with complex discussions with large partners. So it's a tricky one. I mean, I know we've worked together, right? And they can be really hard profiles to find. One thing I'm also very clear on, having sort of worked with lots of sales teams and folks over the years, um, there's very rarely a perfect end-to-end salesperson. Usually you need a combination of some people are fantastic at opening doors, others are great at the discipline, others are good at that sort of ongoing relationship management. You very rarely find someone who is the perfect all-rounder. So it's how do you get a set of people that really complement each other?
sure, that makes sense to me. Thank you for that. That's great, Hugh. You've been hugely generous with your time. There's some really interesting stuff in there that I think people will find very helpful. As you can imagine, doing this job, there's a lot of questions that come up from candidates that they'd love to know the answer to, and I think you've answered a good few there. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Paul. No, it's been my pleasure. Always fun. So no, thanks.
Good stuff.